Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the final session of today's very eventful and insightful program. Last and always far from least, it's my great pleasure to introduce Shanti Jones. Shanti has been a member of the APPA community for a good many years now, and has always delighted and entertained us at annual meetings and at international conferences on philosophical practice alike. She's a counselor from Taos, New Mexico, has published several papers over the years in APPA's journal. And I think that most originally, she's pioneered an art form called the philo cabaret or cabaret philo. Like the cafe philo, it involves a public performance of philosophy. But unlike the cafe philo, these are original scripted cabaret routines that Shanti has both written, produced, and sung for us. And she's premiered most of them at New York meetings of APPA, and also has delivered a good many very well-received performances internationally. Today, she's not going to sing for us, but she is going to give us a presentation on a very important and often neglected topic among philosophers and practitioners, and that is the subject of how your personal growth can outstrip the growth of any virus. But specifically, she's going to show us how literature and plays with strong philosophical content can help during this global pandemic. So finally, without further ado, I will turn things over and welcome Shanti, and please give us your presentation on philosophy and literature, and welcome to you.
What I'm trying to do with this paper and with this talk today is to show how literature can help you get past any virus to living, a good life during a pandemic. I'd like to just take a minute to say how I came about writing this paper. When I was in my 20s, I worked with a Jewish piano teacher. My piano teacher was Jewish, Julian White, and he had gone to Juilliard. And I think he was 50 at the time, and his family, most of them had been, wiped out during the Holocaust. And he, while I was taking piano lessons with him, he was also like a spiritual teacher. And he was telling me right from the beginning that there's a possibility that there could be another Holocaust, or we could have a totalitarian government and a free thinker could be thrown into jail. And he himself, had enough, kind of a difficult childhood that, he thought too, well, what if I got put into jail? How would I survive? So for example, with himself, the example he gave was that he had, of course, many piano pieces under his fingers, but he'd also memorized the keyboard where everything was, so that if he was stuck in a prison for a long period of time, he could just keep, reviewing all the classical pieces that he knew, because he could also hear them so well. And that was one of the ways that he intended to survive. And he asked me, how would I survive? What would I do? So, over all these years, I've really had to think about this question. So I've been thinking about it for probably 40 years. Like if there was a Holocaust or there was some kind of catastrophe, would I be able to get through it nobly? Would I? And, there are many times I would have to say, no, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to. So I had to keep going back to myself and thinking about what would help me. And then I also talked with my clients about it, putting the ante up, because, as we were talking about earlier in the day, these kinds of things take preparation. You can see that people who haven't been prepared during this pandemic are the ones that are really struggling, because they never really thought they would be in this situation, whereas I thought I might be in this situation for 40 years. So he also gave me books to read. And one of the books that we are going to discuss today, A Horseman on the Roof, was one of the books he gave me to read, along with, of course, Viktor Frankl, as Man's Search for Meaning, and Eddie Hilsum, who died during the Holocaust, but left her diaries. She had a spiritual life, and she was able to minister to people all the way, to into the internment camps, keeping them calm, even though they were all going to die, including her. So, you know, these were examples for me of what I was trying to strive for. So, and I've always, like I said, passed this on to my clients. So when Lou, you know, had said they were going to have this journal on the pandemic, I was already well positioned in my mind to, you know, to gather material from things that I had been helped with many, many years ago. So, but then what was really great was during my research, I really kept coming across other really good works that had to do with the plague. And then when I came up with 4 of them, I really liked the concert of how, you know, how each author deals with the plague and deals with different issues that come up. Because I know myself sitting here, I'm only one person, and maybe I have friends. Some of you teach, talk to students, but still, so this offers an opportunity not only for yourself, but also for your clients to explore a variety, or to bring to consciousness a variety of issues that they might not have even really quite thought of before. But it also helps to clarify them where they stand within this pandemic, so that they can go through it, you know, more nobly. Also, my dissertation, you know, was on teaching stories in psychotherapy, and you know, so, and in as a model kind of for this use of literature and philosophical counseling, we have bibliotherapy in psychology. But I would say, you know, when I went back to look at that material, they don't necessarily orient themselves towards the ethical, you know, or how one really, you know, should live. So I think that looking at literature through a philosophical perspective specifically, rather than a psychological perspective, is something that is very useful and different than what has been written about in general in bibliotherapy. So, okay, so next slide, please. You have to kind of move it. It's not really slides. Is it? Yeah. So, you know, this is to show you that the pandemics have happened before. You know, I have a book that I refer to in my article that is about pandemics, specifically from a professor from Yale who goes through all the pandemics throughout history, and really outlines them. It's very interesting to see how people have thought about them through time, and how they've reacted to them, and how they've you know, survived or haven't. So it's a real reality that we have faced, but then people think, well, it's never going to happen again. But now we have enough research to know that it's happened many times, and it's bound to happen again. Next slide, please. So this was a cartoon from the New Yorker. I really liked it. So I don't know. Why did I like it? Because, you know, that, you know, if you have to face God at the end of this pandemic, you know, how do you want your photo to look like, you know? And that's kind of how a lot of people's photos look like right now, right? And so, you know, I hope my souvenir photo and the souvenir photos of my clients are, you know, look more like some kind of peaceful Gandhi or Dalai Lama, you know, rather than this kind of a frightened, panicked approach. Next slide, please. So before we start discussing the plague by Camus, I would like to give a lot of credit to Martha Nussbaum, who in 1990 wrote a book called Love's Knowledge. And if you haven't read it, and you are interested in the crossover between literature and philosophy, it's an excellent book, and it's very readable. Plus, another bonus you'll get out of it is that if you're a Henry James fan, then you will really understand Henry James in a way you never have, and appreciate the depths of him in a way that you might never have before. But she was the one that really, you know, got me thinking about this is the tie between philosophy and literature. That great literary artists are thinking about how people should live, what they would like to teach people about life. I'm not talking about, just popular novels. I'm talking about great literature. And so the authors feel, and you'll see this with Henry James so clearly, they feel an ethical responsibility to represent some aspect of reality in a believable manner, so that that the person who's reading the book can have empathy for the main characters and go through the exercise of the experience without having to go through it themselves, but because they're empathically tied to them, then they learn through this story about how to live or how not to live. So, and I picked these 4 novels particularly because I think all 4 of these authors are, very philosophically astute, and so the issues are particularly well brought up here. Another thing I would like to bring up philosophically is that every book, the plague itself is a limit situation. So we go to Carl Jaspers, and of course Lou writes about limit situations in his books too, and how important they are in helping people think through the ethical things that they're involved in, because you're pushed into a situation that you can't change. No matter how hard you try, it's not going to go away. And so now, what are you going to do? And normally we think we're free to do almost anything, or that life has unlimited possibilities. But all of a sudden, as we see with the pandemic, we're at home, and the possibilities are limited. Some people are going crazy. They need psychotropic drugs, or they need recreational drugs to make it through. Or they're running off to the beaches, to kill themselves with thousands of other people on the beaches because they can't stand being alone. So, so the limit, but they knew from like their philosophical counselor that what they were facing was a limit situation, and how valuable it can be to the formation of a self. Then I think this alone would help a person to make better use of the limit situation of the pandemic that we're in now. So every novel, well, we're talking about 3 novels and one dramatic play by Henrik Ibsen. So they're not all 4 novels, they're all 4 literary works. And they all represent these limit situations in different ways. And, we can't take for granted that everybody thinks that literature and philosophy go together. For example, in this last, I get the Journal of Applied Philosophy. I don't know if any of the rest of you get it, but whoops, I can't quite get it up there. How do I tilt it so you can see? Oh yeah, the International Journal of Applied Philosophy. And just in this in fall volume 2019, there was an article called, Can We Learn About Real Social Worlds from Fictional Ones? And so, and this gentleman says that because, all novels are made up, that you're better off either, reading about these ethical dilemmas in theory or through thought experiments than through novels, because they don't really represent real life, and what are you really going to learn from them. So, I was kind of shocked that somebody, thinks that way in today's time, but it isn't obvious to everyone that literature can be valuable to people in a way that philosophy isn't. They're complementary. So one of the reasons that literature is valuable in a way that philosophy isn't is that it gives it talks specifically about day-to-day situations. It's practical, as opposed to when you're reading a theoretical philosophical text, it's theory. But here we're dealing with empirical real life, people who are in real life situations like we are. And like I said, we come to identify with the characters, and so we care about them. And so their dilemmas, maybe we even care about their dilemmas more than we do our own, just because the dilemma is put out clearly and we're not so emotionally involved in it. So that's one thing that is helpful about a novel. Another thing is that the novel is both horizontal. It teaches us about daily life and what goes on in the world, but it's also vertical because it is also teaching us about the ethics of life and the spiritual aspects of life, and and all of its concerns from the higher to the lower. So those are also some reasons why literature can be of value and as an aid to philosophy, because it specifically illustrates some of these moral dilemmas that we're talking about in more theoretical terms. Okay, so the first novel, we're going to talk about 4 novels. So you don't know which 4 they are, so I'll tell you the 4. The 3 plus the dramatic offering. The first one is The Plague by Albert Camus, and I'm wondering how many people have read it. So I can't see everybody, but so yeah. So that we're going to discuss that, and then we're going to discuss Nemesis by Philip Roth, which is about the polio epidemic in 1944. And then we'll be discussing Horseman on the Roof by Jean Giono, who's a Frenchman, whose novel takes place in the late 1700s in Provence during a plague of cholera. And then the last work we'll be talking about is by Henrik Ibsen, a playwright from Sweden who wrote about an epidemic, outbreak of typhoid in a small resort town. So, okay, so here we go. Next slide, please. So Albert Camus' novel, The Plague, takes place in a town in Algiers. That's where he came from, and takes place in about also in the early 1900s. And in the first, and so this is a town you can see it there's not much appealing about it. It only exists for the for the commerce that it provides, but there's not really much beauty to it, and really people only live to make a living, and there's not much for them beyond that. So the novel starts out with the main character, who we later find out is also the narrator, Dr. Ryu, who is the first to see the rats that are coming out of the woodwork who are dying, and then and then pretty soon he starts to see people dying. So he's a doctor, so he's the first one. He's at the hospital. So so then he starts to tell people, and lo and behold, it's not anything unlike Trump. The mayor says, don't mention the word pandemic, don't mention the word plague. We don't want to hear that word in this town. We don't have anything like that. So again, just as today's time, the pandemic there was made worse because people didn't respond in a timely manner, and pretty soon the whole town was shut down. So I think this is important because I find that my clients, and my friends included, they get tied up in the day-to-day, like, oh, look at Trump and all these politicians, they didn't pay attention and now it's made it worse. Well, so what is new really about that? And we could spend time being angry about that. And of course we should pay attention to it. It's, it's part of the social reality. But by the same token, we're left with, as the individual, having to respond, in a noble way to the situation, and in a sensible way. And so we shouldn't be surprised, is what I'm saying. And and take it into our stride of learning about plagues in general, and the commonalities of situations that humans are in. So one of the things that's beautiful about The Plague is that Camus of course, he's an existentialist, though he likes to say he's not an existentialist, or he liked to say he wasn't. But the reason that I can understand about that is that, of course, he has the existential aesthetic of the importance of freedom versus responsibility, and the person becoming the subject of their life, and so he has that. But he departed from Sartre because Sartre was an atheist, and was very, though Camus thought that there was an absurdity to life, but at the same time, by the end of his life, he also was, by some reports, thinking of converting back to Christianity, and finding more hope in life and meaning in life than Sartre seemed to be able to. And so it was over the meaning issue that that Camus wanted to separate himself out, but his aesthetics is very existential. And I would say all of these four authors, the aesthetics are all have existential concerns. So, and that was one thing I learned during this paper too, is that there is a field called existential aesthetics. I really didn't know that, but you can go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and find that there's really quite a bit on existential aesthetics. So if you're teaching, or any one of these novels, or you're more interested in what are the underlying philosophies behind these novels, there is a good place to turn to. It was very helpful to me. So one of the things, like I said, Camus has all these different characters that have to take different positions to the plague. So, there's the priest, right, who first says, oh, this is God's doing, and then, he takes different kinds of Christian perspectives on it. And then there's, there's the character who's stuck in the city. He didn't mean to be there. He just happened to be there. And now he's stuck there until the pandemic is over, and he's separated from the woman he loves. So, what does he do in that time? Then there's another character that I really particularly like, and you'll see there's in Philosophy Now magazine. I don't know if any of you get Philosophy Now magazine, but they had an article this month also on the plague. He loves the character Tarou, and Tarou is the rebel. And I love the character Tarou too, because I was a rebel much of my life, and I could have benefited by both being told that there was some value in it, but also being shown how to temper my rebelliousness. So I think if you have any clients going to philosophical counseling, if you have any clients who have a tendency towards rebellion, which you hope they do, Tarou is a really good character to introduce them to, because he starts rebelling early on in his life over the issue of what do you say, corporal punishment, on when you when you put someone to death. His father was a judge, and he saw his father sentence someone to death and enjoy the whole spectacle of a firing squad, and he couldn't believe it. And so this is what it made him initially a rebel, and he has to come back to terms with with this kind of thinking about death and life in this situation of the plague, where again, do we open up because people need jobs, or do we close down because more people will live? So Tarou is in the middle of all of this and thinking about it. He's a very central character to the novel. Another very touching moment in the novel that would be helpful to clients, and some clients would be there's a judge that we all come to like. He's a very fine individual, and he has a son that's 7 years old. And in the middle of the novel, his son dies from the plague. And so he, of course, he wants to know, because he can't be with his son when his son is dying because his son is quarantined. So it brings up, you know, the whole thing of the innocent. Why do innocent people die? Why do they have to suffer? You know, why do bad things happen to good people? And those kinds of issues can be raised from this death of the child in the in this novel. And I guess one more thing that I'd like to mention before I go on to the next work of art is that the main character, Dr. Ryu, he's a real good paradigm for the individual who is nobly doing the right thing, and stands up for it and brings other people together to do the right thing themselves. You know, he does his duty. That's what he does from beginning to end. He does his duty. He's a very touching person, and someone, you know, that when your clients are thinking about their own highest good and how they live it out, he's a one example that you can turn to. So one last thing is that the plague really is it's a metaphor for any kind of excess, right? Because during Camus' time, it was World War II. So a lot of times people think of this as the plague is really the Nazi invasion. That's a kind of plague. And so it's any kind of excess. And you can see what COVID-19 is about. It's about all our excesses. You know, every one that we didn't pay attention to was caught up with us with this pandemic. So, so those are some of the, sort of, that's the general story of the plague. At the end of the story, of course, the town opens up again, but that's the general story. And there's a few issues why people might want to read it themselves or introduce their clients to the book that would encourage them to read about it. Are there any questions about the plague or any comments by people who have read it that would like to add anything before we move on? You know, maybe I've left something out. Yes, Lou.
Oh no, you've done a great job with the plague. May I just add one thing? I don't know if anyone can hear me. Can you hear me, Shanti? Yeah, okay. Just one thing. There's one character in there who always amused me, because Camus also had a sense of humor. And he does interject some ironic humor in the plague, in the character of Grande, whom he uses to pillory Plato. Because remember, Grande shows up every day. He's trying to write his novel, and every day he shows up and he can never get past the first sentence because he's trying to write the perfect sentence. And he can never get past the first. He keeps writing and rewriting this one sentence every day of the whole plague, because he wants every sentence, to his idea of a novel is that every sentence has to be perfect, right? So he can never write it because the first sentence is just, he never gets past it. And I mean, I interpret this as Camus poking fun at Plato, because Grande wants to write the ideal sentence, yeah, which he can never manage to do. Anyway, that's just a comment, but I think your treatment is wonderful.
Yeah, and I think too, thank you, Lou. I think too, thinking about Grande, one of the sources I read mentioned him as being Camus' real hero of the novel. And you brought up one reason why that might be, and he brought up another reason, which was that here's this guy, kind of like Sisyphus, trying to roll the rock up, the mountain. He's never going to do it. But he's doing that, but he's also in day-to-day life without being philosophical about it. He did his job correctly. He had a menial job, but he did it well. He's writing this novel, it isn't going to ever be published, but he's serious about it. He's serious about somehow seriously involved with his life. And Camus had great sympathy for people like him. I think we all do, right? And so that was one possibility for the hero of the novel, which I was really surprised to hear somebody mention it, but I could see that there was value in seeing it that way. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to say about the plague from their experience? I saw Sky said she thought it was readable. So if you're still here, Sky, do you have anything you'd like to say about it?
Oh no, I was just saying it was relatable about getting stuck on the first sentence all the time. That's all.
Oh, relatable for you as a writer. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Vana has her hand up also.
Oh, Vana, thank you.
But she's muted. She needs to unmute. Oh, well.
There we
There
go.
she is.
Sorry about that. Just the general notion of the plague. I think it's I read a comment by Alain de Botton recently that this, to some extent, we're always in a plague. If there is there's always the possibility confronting us that our life may fall apart, that there's something that will happen that's beyond our control, and that there's going to be uncertainty. And, that I think is a deep philosophical issue that we need to perhaps address, not only our fears of death, but also our inability to deal sometimes with uncertainty.
Thank you, Vanna. I saw Massimo put up the issue of the Philosophy Now, and I'll give him a plug. He did he reviewed a book that in that issue too, and called a book called The Character Gap. So you can look for Massimo's book review in the Philosophy Now issue too. Okay, so the next book that we're going to talk about is Nemesis by Philip Roth. How many people have read Nemesis? I can't see everybody, but it doesn't, there's one you have, Salvatore. So, yeah, so not too many people, I think, have run across it. Even my philosophical counselor, David Brendel, who's Jewish, and he's read some Philip Roth, but he didn't even know about this novel. So I felt, good being his client, introducing him to something that he didn't know about. So, and this was Philip Roth's last novel. This is what's so really great. When you think is his last statement, and he had some more years he could have written, but he stopped, he chose to stop writing at that point. So there's a lot of profound messages in the play, in Nemesis, that Philip Roth really brings forth that are not only very, it's a very readable story, because if you've read Philip Roth, you know how aesthetically pleasing some of his writing can be, but the story itself brings up a lot of philosophical issues. So this story takes place, like I said, in 1944. Okay, so now we can move the slide, sorry. There's the Philip Roth, died in 2018, and he's a Pulitzer Prize winning author, and Camus, of course, was a Nobel Prize winning author. Okay, next slide. So his novels often take place, in these kind of poor Jewish suburbs. This one is a poor Jewish suburb of New Jersey, right? So, and what's happening is that it's the war has started, and so the main character, whose name is Bucky, Bucky is he's like just 21, and he's grown up in this poor neighborhood, and his mother died when he was young, actually at childbirth, and his father was a person who went to prison. So he was raised by his poor Jewish grandparents, and kind of made it, through life, just, grew up on his own, trying to be very good, and so he makes it through college. He becomes like a phys ed teacher back in his neighborhood, and also a playground assistant for the summer. So what happens is he's just started working as the playground assistant. He had been working that year in the teaching, and then the summer starts and the polio epidemic breaks out. And the worst areas, of course, are the poor areas, and that includes this Jewish kind of ghetto area that he lives in. So within about a week or two after he's been there, 3 of his students, the children that are coming there, a couple of them die, and he goes to the funerals and everything. But so he's confronted right away with death and the meaning of death, and so and he goes to these funerals. So this is all new for him as a young 21-year-old. Well, as it happens, and so this is a story of a lot of moral mistakes, because so this is his first moral mistake. What's going to happen right? What's going to come up right now? So he has a girlfriend he's actually is going to become engaged to her right in the beginning of the novel, and she comes from a wealthier family. Her father is a doctor. They like Bucky because Bucky, he's a very nice young man. So the doctor's happy that Bucky wants to marry his daughter. She's up in the Poconos. So she's at a Jewish camp for wealthy kids, right? And there's no polio there, this. So, and as it turns out, one of the counselors, who's also, one of the works in out of doors, he got called up to go to World War II as a soldier. So now there's a space for Bucky, and not only that, they can be together. Well, he'd already had a talk with her father about how this was really a good job to be in, at the playground, because these children needed help. If he quit, they wouldn't have help. They would have no place to go, and probably it would be worse. And he could help them with their hygiene. And so he'd already felt that he had a purpose there, but he let his girlfriend talk him out of it. So he agreed that he would go to the Poconos, and he quit his job. And of course, the supervisor was very upset, because how is he going to find somebody to replace Bucky during a pandemic, where the kids all around there were getting polio. So this left him in a lurch. So off Bucky goes. So that was his first, moral mistake. He should, like I said in my paper, he should have had a philosophical counselor with whom he could have discussed this issue, because, he went against his better judgment. So he gets to the camp, and he's very happy to see his girlfriend, very happy to be at this wealthy, pristine place. Nobody has polio. Well, within about a week or 10 days of us getting there, the boy that he's been working with most closely breaks out with polio, and so they have to take him to the hospital. And he has polio, and of course, who probably likely brought it to the camp. I mean, no one can say for sure. So Bucky has to go get tested, and yes, Bucky does have polio as well. So now he's got this guilt on his shoulders, and we'll see that this is another theme that runs throughout this novel, is guilt, and what does one do about the guilt that one carries. So when he's in the hospital, his girlfriend comes and says, "Look, Bucky, I really still want to marry you," and he refuses to let her marry him, thinking that she'll have a worse life with him. So he sends her away. So he decides for her. So there's another moral mistake, right? He decides what's better for her, rather than coming to some kind of agreement, because she was totally prepared. She loved Bucky, and her father and mother wanted her to marry him too. They liked him as well. So he backed out there, and so then the novel ends about 30 years later, and he's working for the post office at a desk job. He never married. He lives in a crummy little apartment, and he runs into one of his students who also contracted polio, but by contrast, he had a good family. They supported him. He went off to college. He met a woman. They got married. He had 2 children. Yes, he feels badly that he has polio and he can't walk and he can't play ball with his kids, but he's had a nice life, and he's grateful for the life he's had. And, so you get the contrast of the two, and, the book, the closes kind of on that scene. So
Shanti, may I just interrupt for a moment, please?
Yes.
Can you cover your last 2 works in 20 minutes?
Yeah,
Please?
I can.
And we're all hearing chimes, and everyone's
sorry.
muted except for you.
Okay.
There are
I
these
forgot.
chimes.
I didn't think it
going
would
off.
catch that. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for telling me. I didn't realize. I
Okay.
hope they weren't making it
Well,
impossible.
that's fine. So they're your chimes. I mean, chimes
They're
are
mine.
okay.
It's very windy here too. So, okay.
Yes.
So you can see, first of all, that, what's really great about this is real moral dilemmas come up for this person. And then how he doesn't really have the help to deal with them, and how he might have done better if he had. Then also the issue of guilt, existential guilt and real guilt, because he also starts out feeling guilty because he wanted to go in the military, but he had bad eyesight, so he couldn't. So there's a lot of different places where he gets to feel guilty. And, I'm a Carl Jasper's fan. He has a really good, in psychopathology, has a really good, like 4 or 5 page section on guilt, all the different kinds of guilt and how they can be thought of and dealt with. And so it's a resource. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything they'd like to add about Nemesis?
Maybe we can save the questions to the end, Shanti.
Okay.
Please,
All right.
please continue, okay?
Okay, thanks. So now the next novel is Horseman on the Roof. It's by Jean Giono, so we can change the slide now. And so this is Jean Giono. Horseman on the Roof was made into a movie, and with Juliette Binoche, and Jean Giono himself was not only a novelist, but he was also a director. And so this novel, we can go to the next slide. It takes place in Provence. Okay, so and a lot of it takes place in these small villages where now this one looks very beautiful, but at the time that the novel starts out, the hero Angelo is traveling through the southern part of France, and cholera is beginning to break out in all the villages. So I would say that this, yeah, you could look at this all day. It's beautiful, isn't it? So this novel, I think, is different than the last two because the main points are really tied up with first the hero, Angelo, and then this wise old doctor that Angelo runs into in the end. So Angelo, his name means angel, right? So, and Horseman on the Roof implies somebody who's walking, above the earth. So one of the things that I really benefited from in reading this novel was thinking a lot about what does a person who's naturally ethical, what is their inside life like? So you get to see him go through a lot of situations where because he's trained as a soldier, and people are, it's the rule of, it's not the rule of law, right? It's, what do you call it? The one person against another. It's a jungle out there because everybody's desperate due to the cholera epidemic. People are dying, they're starving to death. And so, people are always trying to rob him or, throw him into places where he could get cholera. But he's very thoughtful about every situation that he's in. He watches, he observes himself. He thinks about what he's thinking about, not only what he's thinking about, but what he's doing. He thinks about what other people are doing. And regardless of what other people are doing, he always chooses to do the moral thing. So to me, he's again, and when I was asking myself, could I survive a pandemic? He was a really good role model for me as how do you survive a pandemic? What kind of person do you have to be in order to, give yourself the best chance? And I would say Angelo is representative of that kind of person. And so if with your clients, if you're looking for someone, who represents a moral ideal, he certainly does do that. And so that's one reason to focus on this particular work. But I also found, that the elderly doctor really, is so important to this work because, he's elderly and wise. He's relied on philosophy. He's relied on great literature, and also upon his own experience. He's reflected upon all of these things, and he's retreated into the mountains. He lives, by himself. And so now Angelo has come there. It's about the end of the novel, and the doctor recognizes he has a sensitive young person who's for an audience, so he tells him. And why he thinks certain people survive and why other people die. And of course, what it really gets down to is something that Lydia, alluded to this morning, which is people don't come to terms with their own death and the meaning of their own life. So, until cholera or any other kind of pandemic hits them right in the face, and then they realize, okay, my goodness, I could die. And then their whole life flashes in front of their face. Like I showed you in the cartoon in the beginning, what kind of person have I really been, and what did all this mean really? And it's so overwhelming that they actually practically jump into the opportunity to die because, how could they live after that? And he talks about how, when doctors do autopsies, you get to see the physical cause of death, but you don't get to see the real cause of death. And that's really how the person lived their life. That's what you don't know, is how they lived, how they died, how they maneuvered themselves through all these different human situations. That doesn't show up in the autopsy. So, then of course he talks about who he thinks would survive, and of course they're the qualities that I've mentioned about in terms of Angelo's very qualities. So again, what comes up in everybody's mind is, how am I going to survive this pandemic? How do I survive? And I think Angelo and the doctor offer us two really good possibilities for answers or viewpoints to look at as we question it for ourselves and help our clients to look more carefully at those issues. Okay, so now the last work that we're going to deal with is a play. It's called An Enemy of the People, and it's by Henrik Ibsen. So Henrik Ibsen died in 1906. He is the father of what's called like realism in theater. So before that time, there it was a lot more in drama. It was more entertainment, and he removed what they call the fourth wall. So you got to move into the space, and it was really what was quote really going on. So as you might remember, he also wrote The Doll's House. So that was another big work of his. So An Enemy of the People has also been made into a movie with Steve McQueen. So if you're interested, it's actually been made into a movie by an Indian director too. And I think there have been 3 movies made of it. And today it's being performed more often than ever since Trump came into office, because so many of the issues that are brought up in An Enemy of the People, and Trump even used that term, an enemy of the people. So it's being performed more than ever today, so relevant to our time. Okay, so you want to switch slides, the next slide, please. So this story takes place in a town in Sweden, Norway, where it's like a small resort town, and they the way they're going to make their money is the year before they financed the building of these beautiful bathhouses. So so now there's been a lot of capital invested in these bathhouses, and the summer before, some of the facilities were open and people came. And of course, these resorts at those times, they were spas, and they had doctors there who would, also recommend prescribed treatments and things. So the doctor that was there the summer before saw that some of his patients, by the end of the summer, they were sick. And he wanted to know why they were sick. He had some kind of intimation that it might be something with the baths. So he sent being a scientist, he sent a water sample to the university, and he was waiting for it to come back. And lo and behold, it comes back. Yes, there's typhus in the water. So he's really, he's a very, Dr. Stockman is his name, Thomas Stockman. And, you have to like him because, he's so naive and that he thinks everybody's going to be glad that they get the news that now they're going to know that there's typhus in the water and they're going to save all these people's lives. Well, so he's really amazed. Well, his brother's the mayor. Okay, so he goes to tell his brother, and his brother again says, don't mention that word. We can't have any word of this, and so he says, well, okay, I'm going to go to the newspapers. No, the newspaper reporters are interested, but then, then when they realize, what kind of trouble they're going to get into, like they're going to get fired, they don't want to publish the story either. So, so the whole town begins to turn against him, and there's a public hearing. So on the day of the public hearing, that's where he gets called the enemy of the people, and they practically run him out of town. But he keeps standing up for what is right, and what he says is what's right is that they clear up the typhus in the water, which again it's somebody it's actually coming from a factory upstream that is polluting the water, and that's the cause of it. So at the end of the novel, though he's about ready, or at the end of the play, although he's about ready to get run out of town, he says he's going to stay. He declares himself, he says, I really have a reason to live. My whole dignity as a person exists right in this action, and I'm not going to walk away from it. And so they've already fired his daughter, who's a school teacher, so he and his daughter start a school. And there is one benevolent person in town who, helps him out. And so it's not an entire loss at the end, but he has lost his job. He's lost, he's no one in the town is for him except his wife and his family and this one other gentleman. So, I think that there's a lot of different points in this story that are really, that are important philosophically. The issue of social responsibility, like, do we, are we responsible to stand up and tell the truth? So, what is our social responsibility in these situations? And even like I bring up the point in my paper about masks or no masks. Are we being responsible just to say, oh, it's important to me to be free, so I don't have to wear a mask, or I can go out in public because my freedom is being, curtailed. Then also that, the truth isn't hidden. We heard in our last, talk that in the corporate world, the truth, where is the truth? It should be brought out. How do people handle the truth? Shouldn't be diluted or altered, even when it goes counter to the wishes of the majority. So, Dr. Stockman is a really good example, even if he might be sometimes naive, of not caring what other people might want or what they might think is right. For him, what matters is what is right, even if he's the only person to defend it. So, it does bring up, like, I had to think, well, how far am I willing to go in my own, would I be willing to be, would I be willing to go to jail? Would I be willing to lose everything? It makes me think a little bit about my own, my own self. And then also the role of corporations. Like Ibsen talks about the fact that authoritarianism doesn't just come from political leadership, it also can come from corporate leadership and private corporations and special interest groups. As Sky talked about earlier, the pressure to get married and to have this romantic relationship, that's not political pressure, it's social. And in this situation, do we conform? Like Tesla says, okay, people, you can come back to work, or you can stay away. Then when they need people to come back to work, those people who are still staying away because they don't feel safe, Tesla fires. So there's that kind of authoritarian position that doesn't always come from politicians. That Ibsen also makes a point of bringing forth. I think another one another point here, which I talked about earlier, is the issue of unresolvable conflicts. And that's really until I identified it as that, I didn't really think about it that way. But if we I first thought, yes, everything has to be shut down. We have to shut it down. We can't have people dying, but then I saw people starving to death and, people having a terrible time because they didn't have work. And then I thought, well, is it better that, some people die and more people can go to work and have food and not kill themselves? It's an unresolvable dilemma, and we like to avoid those unresolvable dilemmas, but it certainly exists in this situation. And we have to use our reason thinking about how to, resolve it for ourselves. So let's see if there's any other point I want to make before I conclude. Okay, so I guess in conclusion, since I have 3 minutes to conclude, I'd just like to say that, the question of how am I to live, which is the perennial problem, is, answered both by philosophy and by great literature. And, I was thinking, why do we turn to these things? And I was thinking because when we're children, we're always looking for mirroring of different parts of ourselves. It's just natural. First, we look to our parents for what is reality, and we look to the outside world for what is the truth, what is reality, what should we do. We're always looking. And both philosophy and great literature offer us mirrors that are, more reliable often than just people in our day-to-day life. They give us mirrors that we're looking for that can show us, reflect back to us aspects of ourselves that we want to see, we need to see. And so I think I did this paper in part to help people through the pandemic, through literature, but also to encourage philosophical counselors who don't necessarily always think about turning to literature. Here's one example of how you can and some reasons why. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Shanti, that's really tremendously insightful and valuable. And once again, Shanti's paper, which elaborates on these points and others, is in the press and will be available along with Vaughna's and Rick's and Andre's and Patricia's and Ashwini's op-ed and Bala's op-ed. There are quite a number of you here who contribute. Alexander, wonderful paper also. I'm sorry if I'm missing anybody. I can't fit everyone on the screen here, but it's a tremendous contribution, Shanti. And before we open up the floor, and I'm sure there will be questions and comments, I'd like to say something with moderator's privilege, if I may. You touched on something very important in your opening remarks, and I want to bring it back into the light for a moment. when you mentioned that people don't know how to deal with isolation. And of course, it's very predictable for us that if I were a gambling man, I would have bought stocks in the liquor companies and the cannabis companies and the illegal drugs too, if they were traded. I mean, everyone's trying to escape or running to the beach and getting infected or infecting everybody. For us, solitude is not a punishment for philosophers. And this is a great, and if the general public needs to learn one thing from us, and it's not text, it's not which philosopher, it's the meta idea that solitude is a beautiful, wonderful thing, and we have more of it than ever before, and that's why we're happy, because we have all this space to reflect. And other people are going crazy because God help them. No one in their lives has ever explained to them what a blessing solitude is. Or they never read Thoreau, or they never read 100 others. So anyway, that's something you touched on. I think it's important to reiterate. If people only had a healthier attitude towards solitude, they would realize it could be their friend. Yes? Okay, so you all get that. Second point, and then I'll pass it on to the floor. I see people smiling at the end of the day, at the end of a long day. That's always a good thing. Second point is, what you've done here, Shanti, is so on point that our college president does a weekly radio show, and he invited me on. That's how desperate they are. They invited me on to talk about how could philosophy help anybody, possibly. And I was sharing the president's broadcast. I mean, he was very friendly and curious. And I shared the broadcast with the chair of our film department. We have a very good film department at City College. And this guy went way further than you, because he gleefully started telling people about the benefits of film noir. So if anybody wants to go beyond where you've gone, I think where you've gone is to a good place, but anybody with a darker frame of mind could go to film noir, and the ones that came up immediately were the classics. On the Beach by Neville Shute, which is the last two survivors in Australia of a nuclear holocaust waiting to die of radiation poisoning, this man and wife. It was a novel from the 50s and was made into one of the most touching movies you'll ever want to see. It's called On the Beach. And the theme song is Waltzing Matilda. It's so sad. These are the last two humans. It's just brilliant. And then, of course, The Seventh Seal. If you want to talk about plague, you have to look. Naturally, we have to look at Ingmar Bergman, where this knight comes back from the Crusades to a plague-infested Europe and challenges death to a chess match, because death says it's time. And the knight says, no, I want to challenge you to play chess. And he plays chess with death. The winner takes all. The knight wins, he lives. The knight loses, he dies. And there's a plague raging, a bubonic plague is raging all around them in the most horrific scenes, as only Bergman could portray them. So that's another good thing if you're into the noir side. The Devils of Loudun, Aldous Huxley's novel. The Devils of Loudun, which are a witch hunt. A guy gets persecuted for being a heretic and eventually torn to pieces and burned by the Inquisition. And there are some horrific plague scenes, if I recall right, in that novel. And of course, we have Night of the Living Dead as the American classic, which has led to any number of sequels, and World War Z being, the more Hollywoodish special effects one. But the original Night of the Living Dead in black and white is more scary than any of them in my book. So anyway, that's just an example of where we could go if we took your lead, and we should definitely go into the literature, and then we could go also into some of the film noir. Those of you who don't have nightmares already, you might want to check out the film noir. But thank you so much, Shanti, for a wonderful and as always a unique and insightful presentation.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
You're
it.
more than welcome. And now, please, a final round of questions or comments for Shanti. Anyone?
I just want to add a novel you might want to consider. It's not about the plague, but it's the Russian novel Oblomov, where he wanders around all day in his bathrobe and wonders, is there any reason to get dressed?
Yes, that's a good one too. Yeah, and then there was, there's also someone, an author in the New Yorker, had a very good article on crime and punishment in the plague. And that, if you haven't seen that, I think that has some relevance to, as we're talking about different movies and plays and literary works that would be useful for philosophical counselors. Ashwini?
Right. Anything else to add? Anyone else to
Ashwini,
add?
just,
Yeah, Lou, I had my hand up,
Oh,
but you didn't see it probably. So Shanti, that was really nice. I enjoyed it. I took notes. I'm gonna read
Thank you.
Philip. I can't believe that I missed the Philip Roth novel actually. So
Oh,
now
I'm
it's gonna
glad I'd
be-
introduce you to something that you don't know too.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. I mean, he's one of my favorite authors, but I haven't read that one, so it's gonna be there. Now, going back to your comment about somebody making an argument, which I've heard before, that literature is not a good way to go in terms of exploring existential or philosophical issues. I always found that incredibly puzzling. And we were talking in the chat with Rick, and we know that Plato made that argument very early on, although he actually wrote fiction, in a sense. So it's kind of ironic. But today we have so many good examples of literature in all sorts of areas. I mean, one of my favorite courses to teach at City College is science fiction and philosophy. And that's because a lot of science fiction is actually dystopian. I taught one version of that course entirely based on Philip K. Dick's novels and stories. And so it's hard to imagine for me to actually have a better vehicle to talk to students about things that they find interesting because they like reading the novels, they like reading the stories, but they never thought about it. I mean, one of the most recurring comments from the students was, "Oh, I never thought that this was about philosophy." And I said, well, I know. Philip K. Dick actually wrote it on purpose. I mean, he had this philosophical background. This was actually on purpose. But most people just look at these things and say, oh, that's interesting, but I never thought about it from a philosophical perspective. In terms of canceling, I'm sure one could come up, if there are not already, lists like the one that Lou was suggesting, of just resources, like novels or plays that might be used as bibliotherapy in counseling. That might be something that the APPA might be interested in actually putting on their website as a common resource.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, Maria, you have something, please? And good point, Massimo. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for the background, Massimo. I like the background. Maria, please.
Yes, I just wanted to say about what Massimo was saying as well right now. Let's look at the quite obvious with Dostoevsky and his existentialist themes, themes about ethics that we could use Dostoevsky, into ethical issues. So, yeah, I think they are quite linked.
Sure. I mean, Dostoevsky viewed normal existence as a plague. So read the Brothers Karamazov.
Exactly.
One vile reptile devours another. That's the whole book, right?
True.
He never needed a plague.
Exactly.
Okay. We have a few minutes. Anybody else want to chime in? Please, Ashwini.
Hi, Shanti. I really enjoyed, the suggestions for all these novels, and I look forward to reading them.
Thank you.
We have a humanities group as a part of the Princeton Research Forum, and we always try to read one book a year, which is about death and dying, and that's sort of keeps everybody focused on the realities of life. And you might be already familiar with a couple of these books that I thought of. But just wanted to mention, one is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande.
Okay.
And the other one I was thinking about is the Tibetan Book of Death and Dying.
Oh, could you type those into the chat, please, Ashwini? Could you just type the titles in? You're talking about the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche.
Anyway, but thank you for introducing those books. I think we'll get to that as well.
Yes, well, when we look too, I was thinking, Ashwini, because you were talking about the Bhagavad Gita, it's another teaching story, right? And with larger cosmic ramifications, of course, but it's another literary work that, has great understandings in it. And I think another point that you made this morning, Ashwini, or this afternoon, was that, preparation is everything. Right. You were saying the discipline, and I think this is something we have to offer our clients. They might not be as prepared as hopefully we are. Like I said, I've been preparing for this for 40 years, but we can help them to gain the discipline, because this shows them the need for it. If they can go through it with us and take these principles like the Stoic principles, the existential ideas from their aesthetics and other philosophical ideas, and have these tools that we give to them, then when it happens again, which we have just global warming to deal with, that isn't going away anytime soon. That's a big pressure. Then they'll be better prepared. And I'm so grateful I'm prepared. I am so, like we were saying, I'm so peaceful. I'm painting, I'm singing, I'm writing with no distractions. Everything's so much better now. So, so we can help our clients to reach a state like that, where it's actually something that they learn from and grow out into and out of.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Maria, do you have your hand up again? Or is that the previous hand? Oh, that's the previous hand. Okay. We're getting close to wrapping this up. It's been a very fruitful day, long day and a fruitful day. And thank you, those of you who've stayed the course. Patricia, I don't know what time it is in Italy, but it's certainly not early. Bettina has been with us most of the day, amazingly. And I see Li Zheng is back. It must be morning in China now. But thank you so much for coming and for participating. It's been a really interesting day, and we have much to unpack as a result. I don't know how the videos will turn out, but if they're at all audible and visible, then they will be processed and made available. Our special issue will be out this month, and many of the contributors to it spoke today. So we will obviously let you know when that comes out as well. And I just want to thank everybody for contributing and for being here. It's been, in some ways, our best meeting ever, certainly in terms of geographic diversity. Nothing beats this platform. Although what we can't do is now go out for a drink, to the bistro, but we can all kind of raise a toast to each other virtually. Vonna, would you like to say your farewell as co-chair, and then we'll wish everyone the best.
Well, I would certainly agree with everything that you said, Lou. Excuse me, it's been a long day, but it's just been wonderful to see you all, and I love the diversity of this group. And so as philosophical counselors, we've always learned to make the best out of adversity for our clients. Look for how to put a positive spin on things for them from a philosophical perspective. So we've done it again today, and thank you, Lou. I want to thank you so much, as I'm sure the rest of us all feel, that you've done a wonderful job in organizing another meeting for us. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a great pleasure. I mean, this organization is now so vibrant. I just have to send out an email, calling for papers or calling for speakers, and people show up in droves with very high quality stuff. So it makes my job pleasurable and, believe me, easy in a certain sense, in the salutary sense. You've all made it easy for this to happen, but only by your effort. So thanks a lot for your commitment, and we will keep in touch via email and, and other manners. Okay, so be well, everybody, Be safe.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, all the
Great
best to you.
day. Good
Until the
night.
next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay well.
everyone.
Stay safe.
Great
Bye-bye.
seeing
Good night,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks
Bye,
again.
Bye,
everybody.
Bye
everyone.
for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, and bye.
Wow.
It has been a great pleasure for me to
Everybody.
meet you
Thanks
all.
a lot.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Rick.
Likewise.
Thanks a lot, Rick, for everything.
Thank you. This is great.
Okay. Jorn, nice to see you. David, nice to see you too. Maria, nice to meet you. We'll see you next weekend. Patricia, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
For me as well. For me as well, really. A
And
great
Sarah,
pleasure.
thank you for staying the course as well. It's really nice to see you. Be well.
Really great.
Thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Li Jing.